Hi, this is Andrew Groh with the Missouri Society of CPAs. This is MOCPA Bar Talk, where we talk about the latest trends, news, and issues that matter to you the most. Let's get started. Hi, welcome. My name is Andrew Groh, here with the MOCPA. Welcome to Bar Talk. It's the first ever podcast. I'm here today with Dave Hartley, CPA with Anders CPAs Advisors. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
We're here to talk today a little bit about technology trends of the future, some disruptive technology issues, things that CPAs in Missouri and elsewhere really need to know and understand to be able to see the tech trends that are coming in the future.
Right.
Yep. Welcome, David. David, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I work with Anders CPAs Advisors here in St. Louis. So St. Louis-based firm, 210, 220 employees, goes up during tax season. So I lead the advisory services practice. So we have a managed services subsidiary, we have a Microsoft practice, but we have a traditional core audit and tax practice as well. So part of that is also looking at how the firm utilizes technology, not just on the advisory side, but also as part of our core operations in audit and in tax. So I've been with the firm for just about a year now.
Perfect.
But my career, about 30 years. It's hard to believe I'm that old, but actually started past the CPA in the early 90s and have had a wealth of different experiences up to this point.
That's fantastic. And what I know you're on MOCPA's Transformation Task Force Committee, a very active member.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about your activities through that committee and some of the things that we're going to be talking about in this podcast today that are coming out of your committee?
Sure. Yeah. So the Transformation Task Force is something that Tom Hilton, who's the MOCPA board chair this year, one of his initiatives is really to focus on that transformation that's happening. And it's not just happening to business, but it's also something that is going to dramatically affect CPAs. And so the Transformation Task Force is really focused on how can we create awareness, how can we create understanding, and start to create maturity around some of these different technologies that are going to impact the profession significantly.
But why now? What is it about right now, this period of time, where you think and the task force and quite frankly our profession is saying we all need to stand up and pay attention to these technologies come down the pipe right now?
Well, I think it's been probably a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. It won't be the first time you've ever heard them, because most of these technologies have been in development for years. I think what's happening now is we're getting to that tipping point of where the technologies are getting to a point where they're going to have the impact that 3 to 5 years ago we saw potential. Now in 2020 is when we're actually going to see the effects of these technologies. And I think that's part of what, in 2019 it was okay that we kind of talked about it, but didn't take it that seriously. Now, if we don't understand these technologies, figure out how to take advantage of them, I think there's a huge impact on competitive advantage for CPAs in terms of how they do business and how their clients do business. And a lot of those relate back to just the changes that are happening in the CPA profession as a whole.
That's fair. And so, if I don't know what blockchain is, haven't heard of robotic process automation.
Yep.
And I'm listening to this podcast and listening to you. Where are you seeing these technologies come through? What types of resources are we as a profession, are you seeing in the Transformation Task Force driving why these ones we're talking about today?
Yeah. So I think that, so today we're going to cover 4 specific technologies, and I think they're all very relevant and they can have a significant impact. In terms of, when I think about how these are going to be incorporated into the CPA world, I mean, there's a lot that's happening at the AICPA level with CPA.com. So I think there is a growing body of training materials that are available in these technologies. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us as practitioners, 2020 is the year to start taking this serious, because it is going to start to have impacts. So where we're seeing it is, the AICPA has done a lot with their partner network in terms of finding technology solutions that really benefit CPAs. I had the opportunity to go to the AICPA's Digital CPA Conference in December, and it was impressive in terms of the technology vendors that were there, and as they talked about the things that they were doing with firms and some of the outcomes that they were seeing. Those are the types of things that we need to make sure that everybody is aware of the potential impact of these technologies, and that it's not just potential anymore, but it is actually some of these things are coming to fruition, and it really is just the beginning of a series of technology impact that's going to affect us for years to come.
Perfect. And so, just a brief introduction. What are those 4 technologies that our profession, the task force, and you really have kind of latched onto that we're going to be talking about today? And oh, by the way, in future podcast discussions, just at a deeper level.
Right. Yeah. So I think the 4 that we've picked out. And I think it's also important to understand that within all of this, there is a context of technology, automation, which of course means cybersecurity is extremely serious. So we're not going to specifically talk about that, but that's kind of the backdrop that all these technologies will operate in. So the 4 specifically that we've called out, the first is data analytics. So we'll talk about that. Next is RPA, Robotic Process Automation. We'll talk about that. Third is AI, which is artificial intelligence. We'll talk a little bit. I prefer to use the term Augmented Intelligence. And then 4th is blockchain. There's been a lot of discussion about blockchain, but I still don't know that people understand why it's important. And so those 4 are the ones that we as a task force, which there's probably 30 of us on the task force, and when we get together and talk, it always comes back to these 4 that we're starting to see how these are having an impact both within our firms, but then also within our client base. And if we want our clients to succeed, these are the topics that we need to make sure that we're working with our clients on and prepared to answer their questions and help them succeed long term.
And do you think these 4 are far enough along that hype cycle? You mentioned it, just a few moments ago, where this is why these 4 have come up to the top, is that they're far enough along where they've passed kind of the sniff test, the initial stages in technology, and are being implemented and look like they've got staying power. Is that kind of where we are?
Yeah, I think so. And it goes back to that evolution that's happened where these tools have been in development. And really in 2019, we saw a number of step changes in terms of things we thought the tools can do that now they're actually starting to do them. And so I think that's part of the excitement level is around some of these things that before it was almost purely theoretical or it was happening in universities or those types of things. Now it's actually manifesting itself within our client base.
Perfect. So on Gartner's hype cycle, we're not talking about smart dust. We're not talking about deep AI, those types of things. But oh, by the way, this conversation is fantastic for 2020. There are, of course, more of those coming along the way, right?
Right. And a lot of what we're going to talk about are really foundational technologies. There's a lot of things that will be built on top of them, but to understand the construct of the 4 that we're talking about is really important because when you look at each of these, where they're going to evolve and how they're going to advance is exciting. And I think that's another thing that we need to get to, which is, none of us are experts in these technologies. If you are, the next day you're not, because they grow and change. And so part of it and part of what we want to do as a task force is to help put this information in a package that any CPA in Missouri can listen to and understand what these technologies are. And really what we want to focus on in this is to understand the why. This is the potential of the impact that this technology is going to have, both on you as a CPA practitioner, but then also for your clients.
Perfect. And with that why, let's jump right into the first topic, the first big tech pillar, which I think that most CPAs have some level of familiarity with, maybe even some expertise, which is data analytics.
Yeah.
Why data analytics and what's new now?
Okay. Well, from an analytics perspective, I think you're right. There has been discussion, and you think about CPAs have used data, and our clients have used data for years. So there's nothing really new that's there. What is new is sort of the level of data that we can handle and the level of data that we can deal with. Plus, the technologies are advancing to the point. I think when I think back to the early days in my career and I think of the tool sets that I had to work with, they were extremely limited. I started pre-internet. We were carrying around some Macintosh computers. So it is, and when I look at where things are now, that continuous evolution in tool sets and capabilities, that's happening now within the world of analytics. An aspect of analytics, and I think what most people have heard about is really the look back type analytics. I think what's exciting is that more and more around the predictive side of analytics, where we're starting to see that you can take a data set and you can actually turn it into knowledge. And as CPAs, historically, especially on the audit side, from an audit perspective, we've done sampling. Now, what these tools are creating the opportunity is to actually look at entire data sets, entire populations. And as a result of that, instead of having to pick a judgmental sample or a random sample, by being able to look at the entire population, then you can identify outliers. Your probability of finding the things that aren't right, that as an auditor you want to find, is going up dramatically because we have better tools. And so I think I think we're going to continue to see that play out. There's also been significant advances in data visualization in terms of the tools that are available for people to look at data in a totally different way than they've ever been able to look at it before. Being able to visualize populations and see things and then actually interact with the data. The tool set has been advancing significantly, and there's a lot more on the horizon that these tools are going to be capable of doing.
So do you think that, would you say that you've seen kind of in your career and talking with colleagues and other CPAs,
Mm-hmm.
we talk about data analytics, it seems like it's a big topic.
Mm-hmm.
Data analytics goes into the ether, right?
Yeah.
You talked about a couple of things. You talked about sampling, you talked about visualization.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole science behind data analytics,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's data science.
Yeah.
Can you kind of tease out why parse out the idea of data visualization, maybe data intake, data cleanup, and some of those different pieces?
Yeah.
Why parse those out?
Well, what I think it's important to look at, what is core in everything you just mentioned is data. And so we as CPAs, we need to get better at understanding populations of data and utilizing tools that can help us understand that data. Now, you're right, from a really sophisticated standpoint, there are some amazing things that are happening. What's happening, though, is that a lot of that is becoming accessible in a way that's never been accessible before. And I think that's really the difference. Like, if you look at a lot of the things that we're looking at now, did they show up in research studies 10, 15, 20 years ago? Yes, they did. But the problem was there wasn't a tool set. We couldn't get the data. We couldn't work with the data that now we do have. And we have different ways and different tools to be able to look at it. So I think there's a lot that data is going to be very fundamental. And maybe we've talked about it, but I think for within CPA firms and also within our clients, do we really understand their data?
Right.
Do we really understand, the value that's going to be created by data on a go-forward basis? I mean, that's part of an asset that we need to make sure that we're thinking about with our clients. And then when you put on the cybersecurity hat, well, if that data is misused or put in a way that it's not supposed to, or from a privacy perspective, if we have issues with privacy, all of that is going to impact our client base. So, and it all comes back to data. So understanding the data you have, being able to work with it, understanding those tools, it's really something that from a maturity standpoint, maybe we can all do it now a little bit and we're okay with it. But what we need to do is mature to the point where we eventually become experts in working with data.
I think so too, from what we're hearing too, what the AI CPA certainly is sharing on this topic as well. Mm-hmm. And I think, and maybe you can speak a little bit to this, this type of concept and being able to analyze and advise on data moves CPA firms up the value chain. Yeah. I think we talk about the value chain quite a bit as a profession. I think that's where things are headed. And oh, by the way, of the 4 topics that we're talking about today, is this now starting to show up on the CPA exam for all CPAs?
Yeah, and I think that's another, when we talk about, going back to the Transformation Task Force, when we look at, there are a lot of things that have been talked about in the profession that when we look at 2020, these things are happening. So when you look at changes to the CPA exam, looking at, rather than having, and I just saw the model for the first time a couple of months ago, but when I look at it in terms of having a core that all CPAs should need to know and understand, and having expertise in that, but then having these
Branching
different,
out.
having these different areas where you're a specialist and acknowledging that one of those is technology.
Yep.
That in addition to taxation or audit and analytics, just that core element of technology is something that we as a profession have to get better at understanding and utilizing on a go-forward basis.
I think that's fantastic, and all in line with the great work that your task force is doing, AI CPA, our profession moving forward. And I think moving forward, that value chain idea has been around for decades and decades, but we're seeing the pace of that change so quickly, and these tools being able to be leveraged to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think the part of that is we've always, as CPAs, we've strived to be the most trusted advisor, and I think we've been successful. Our clients, when you look at how they perceive us, they do trust us. The issue is, and the challenge is, how do we as CPAs, when we look at the future way that business is going to be done, how do we stay relevant in these conversations? And it's really evolving from being the most trusted advisor to really being the most valuable advisor. So rather than our clients looking to their banker or looking to their attorney, there is a very valuable role that CPAs need to play, but it's different than where we are today. And that's part of why these technologies are so important, because that's part of what we as a profession, our clients need us to help them in these areas. And it's different from anything we've done in the past.
I think it's super cool. It's an exciting time, when other CPAs embrace these types of things, moving up the value chain. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about robotic process automation.
Okay.
Now, this is one of the 4 disruptive tech pillars that your task force has identified.
Yep.
CPAs, everyone may have a little cursory knowledge of RPA.
Mm-hmm.
What is it, in your own words, and why now are we embracing robotic process automation and trying to get conceptually CPAs to really understand what it is and then how to use it?
Yeah, and I think once again, when we talk about why this technology is important, and we can go back and talk about the core of the technology, but why this is important is because this could have a massive impact on productivity. So when we look at the cost, historically CPAs have looked at, well, how much time does it take to do something, and that's how we price it. As we look at technologies like RPA, they could dramatically change how long it takes people time to do things. So let's talk about RPA, because it is, if you don't know what it means, it's kind of intimidating. So within RPA, there are things called bots, okay? So a bot is basically a piece of software that does a task for you that you need it to perform. And in terms of, I think it's important, rather than the term bots, which I think is accepted and okay, I prefer to think of it in terms of it's really a digital assistant. So once again, RPA has come to fruition because the technologies have evolved to a point where the RPA technologies can really be impactful. So for example, let's talk about an example of RPA. When you think about how somebody spends their day, I think an easy way to think about it is to really think about how people work now. A lot of times when you think about it, okay, well, I'm going to go in this system and I'm going to do these things in this system. Oh, and then I have to take this data and I have to put it into this system.
Right.
And then I can do that. And then, once I have that, then I'm going to have to move it over here. And to this point, the only way to accomplish that was with a human.
Right.
What's happening now is that if it is a repetitive process that happens over and over, now there is ability to create a bot or a digital assistant that will do that for you. So you can now train a bot that looks at, okay, I'm going to go into this system. Every time I go in, I always look for these same things, and I take this data and then I move it to this system over here. So the bot has the capability to perform those same steps and then go and open this application and do the things that I need it to do, and then the data that results from that then can come and be put into this system. But all that happens systemically. When you think about, somebody comes in at 8 a.m. in the morning and they may spend the first 2 or 3 hours of their day doing something that is really not fun.
Shipping coffee, right?
Well, you could start with coffee, which you would probably need. But going from that one system to the second system to the third system, a lot of us maybe grew up that way, but those are tasks that really don't add a lot of value and are not a lot of fun. And so when you step back and ask someone, look at your day, and what is it that you do that you really don't enjoy doing? A lot of it, those are perfect candidates because they're repetitive things that really don't require a human. If you could have a bot that would do it, rather than you spending the first couple of hours of your day figuring those things out, when you come in the morning, the bot, which can work 24 hours a day, doesn't quit, is always going to be there. By 8 a.m., they will deliver that result. So you come in, and rather than do the 2 to 3 hours of things that really don't add any value, you're at that point where now you can maybe start performing analysis and do the things that we as humans are really good at, and let the digital assistants or the bots, let them take some of these more repetitive things that you really, as humans, we don't add a lot of value doing it, and it's really not something that we enjoy.
Right. But I'm not going to go out, first of all, to PetSmart to get my bot. And I'm not, and I'm probably not going to go out to Office Depot or something off the shelf. If I'm looking at what I'm hearing potentially is a custom solution, or at least you can't just go somewhere and grab exactly what you need. How do I go about thinking about, do I need a bot for these tasks or this task? And where do I go to find out if I can get a bot for that?
And I think that's an important part. And when we think about the role that the MOCPA is going to perform, I think that's one of the things that gets really interesting. Because when you look at the RPA technologies and what they're capable of, I think from the standpoint of how people are going to, I think your first point is really good, which is if you don't have a good use case, then these technologies aren't going to be that powerful. You have to find those repetitive things that happen over and over again that are consistent. Once you found those, then I think not everybody needs to be an RPA expert in terms of not everybody is going to be developing bots. But what is going to happen is people are going to have to use them, and then you have some subset of your employees that are becoming more citizen developers in this space. So they actually can take these tools and they can use it themselves, where they're able to create and, this is what I do. I'm going to create a bot that's going to do it for me. That's not going to be all of your employees, but it is going to be a percentage of your employees that will be able to do those types of things and then help and take these technologies and allow them to grow. So we have companies that we're looking at that are taking these types of technologies and deploying them to all of their users because they're encouraging that innovation to happen across all the companies. So everybody's got exposure to these types of technologies, which is one of the reasons why we as CPAs need to be aware of and understand the potential impact that these technologies could have.
I think that's fantastic. And I think in a very similar and parallel technology, moving on to the third pillar, artificial intelligence. So your thoughts on AI, and I think you mentioned maybe augmented something.
Augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial.
First of all, if we just heard what robotic process automation is, what's the difference between RPA and augmented intelligence?
Okay, so RPA is really those basic technologies that we talked about, which is basically the ability to perform a repetitive task that right now a human is performing. AI is really, it's related to RPA, but it's different in terms of it's really the ability to take those technologies and now have the technologies to continue to learn and evolve so that if something changes, when you think of RPA, if something changes and there's a field that moves or something like that, your RPA tool breaks.
Can't handle it.
Can't handle it. From an AI perspective, that's where you're really looking at and having these technologies that can learn and can take, as things happen, can look at populations, analyze populations, make assumptions, apply algorithms. There's things, you can debate whether it's smart or not, but things like smart contracts, where when certain things happen and certain conditions are met, then the technology knows to execute that, to make changes and work on that. So I think it's really, it's very similar technology to RPA, but fundamentally it is very different.
And then what types of considerations, so you gave the example of, finding those repetitive tasks from RPA technology. On a decision tree, when do I start thinking about, wow, I need to move up that kind of tech chain from RPA or a bot to, I got to find somebody who can come in and bring in artificial intelligence to help us work on these things.
Right.
Where are those decisions made? How do you make those
So
decisions?
I think, it goes back to previously we talked about data and the importance of data. And when you look at all of these things, this is really, it's all along the evolution of how we use data. And I think it's also helpful to look at, and maybe a way to help people understand, how AI could have an impact is in terms of, we've looked, and we've talked about this in analytics, that most of what we've done to this point is look in arrears, look to the past, which is traditionally what we have done as auditors is what we've done. I think now what's happening, and when you think about the role that CPAs need to play as part of AI, when you think about that, there are algorithms that are basically somebody's making a decision that is telling the AI as it's learning sort of what, and there are decisions that are being made that are implied that happen within AI. So you think about it from an audit perspective, who is looking at that AI tool and the algorithms that are in it and making sure that that's doing what we think it's doing? Yeah, and if it is making decisions and it's going to go this direction or this direction, how do we know the logic of what's happening within that AI tool is actually happening the way that we think it is? So I think it's one of those things from an audit perspective that a lot of what we're going to see across all of these technologies is that we're moving from I'm going to come in once a year and I'm going to look back over the previous year. What's happening now is that a lot of these are much more real time. That when you think about as things are happening within AI, I need to understand that algorithm. And if that algorithm changes, I need to understand why it changed and was the change approved. And so there's all the traditional things that CPAs have done, but it's kind of taking our traditional skill set and applying it in a new way that we really haven't before because the technology's never been there. When we talk about blockchain, that's kind of an extension of that real-time aspect of where CPAs need to be involved as part of that, as part of this technology and how it impacts both our firms and our clients.
And I want to talk to blockchain. One of my favorite topics. I think it's super cool technology from the little that I know about it. But can you tie those concepts together, especially in terms of maybe the audit of the future? Maybe what is a blockchain? And I think my guess is many CPAs have some basic level knowledge of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. Is that what blockchain is, or is it something different?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of the cryptocurrency type aspects. A lot of that does get tied in with blockchain, but I think it's important to understand the differences. Now, from a crypto perspective, we absolutely need to understand what's happening there because the IRS, when you look at the forms, basically they want to know you need to start disclosing what's happening in crypto.
Yeah.
And so as tax professionals, we need to be prepared for that conversation that we need to ask our clients about that. So that's going to start that dialogue. If we don't know what it is and how it works, we're going to be at a disadvantage. So there's that part of it. But the really the impact of blockchain, and when we talk about why it's important, it does fundamentally change the role of what CPAs do.
Why? That's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, and I think the why is also around why this is an exciting time as opposed to a time to be feared. When you look at historically, when we do an audit, we will produce a set of financial statements that looks back over a period of time. And now what's happening as blockchain happens is, once again, more and more of that is moving to be, we have to be involved real time. So let's talk about blockchain in terms of what that means. So there's a lot of discussion about the blockchain. So blockchain is a technology that is used in a lot of different ways. There are examples of companies that have started their own blockchain and use that technology to accomplish a business objective.
So I can't take a walk down to the blockchain and go check it out.
You could.
Just the blockchain.
Yeah. But it's important to understand that it's that it's going to be implied in a lot of different contexts. It's important to think of it in terms of a distributed ledger that everybody has access to, which is another one of the fundamental changes. When you look historically, why do we have to do an audit? Well, we have to do an audit because we define these rules, but we have to make sure people are playing by the rules. Blockchain could be totally different because everybody will have access to transactions. So when a transaction happens and it's written into a blockchain, it's immutable. You can't change it. So when you think about, well, as a CPA, traditionally we've come in at the end and looked back and made sure they followed the rules.
Verified those, yeah.
Yeah. Now it's happening as it's happening. And if we're not involved, and is a CPA looking at those transactions before they're finalized into the blockchain? Because once they're into the blockchain, you can't change them. They're there, and everybody has visibility and access to it. So as opposed to the days that we've had in the past where there's a set of rules and we do audits to make sure people are following them, our role as trusted advisors shifts significantly, where now we're more involved on a real-time basis in how our clients are using technologies like blockchain. So from an excitement level as a CPA, as opposed to coming in and doing those audits that may or may not be valuable because we're only looking at the past, now to be involved real time in our clients' businesses and understanding the transactions that are happening, and then as things happen within blockchain, that we're able to apply data analytics tools to see what's happening and to get this real-time visualization. None of this has existed before. So blockchain as a technology has the ability to be, or has the potential to be, extremely disruptive.
Especially if and potentially when financial systems, technology goes mainstream. And so, I'm not sure if you have any, kind of futures look at that. How might you see that happening if the government starts asking, banks or other systems to begin, putting transactions on blockchains? Might it come up through individual business and industry sectors?
Yeah.
Where might you see those things go taking off?
So let's talk about where we're starting to see it now. In terms of, a lot of us deal with smaller and middle market companies from a CPA perspective. When you look at, will our small to mid-sized clients be creating blockchains and saying, hey, everybody participate in our blockchain? No, that's not going to happen. But what is happening is that the big guys are saying, hey, we have a blockchain whereby we are verifying the integrity of all the vegetables we buy and how we get them. So you may have a farmer that suddenly is being asked by a large organization that, hey, you need to participate in our blockchain. And how do we as CPAs advise our clients if we don't know what blockchain is and how it might potentially impact them? So that's one of the things that I think is important for everybody to understand, and we're going to start to see more and more of those things play out within our businesses that we work with. And so we have to be prepared as CPAs to be able to help them with that journey, because they need somebody that's going to help them through those technologies.
That's perfect. And I think one last thing on this topic, you teased it, I think, the audit of the future and blockchain. Mm-hmm. Conceptually, we've chatted offline, we talked a little bit about it, a SOC 2 cybersecurity audit. Mm-hmm. Systems auditing is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What does that mean for auditing professionals, CPA firms in the future if you think about fundamentally changing the function of an audit?
Yeah, and I think it does move more to that real-time assurance. So rather than looking at and auditing a set of financial statements, it really is a shift to auditing and understanding systems and processes and technologies. And that's really when you think about SOC reports, SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports, specifically SOC 2 focused on cybersecurity. That's where as CPAs, more and more of what we're going to do is going to shift in that direction. So when you think about SOC reports and how they're utilized now, it really is an understanding of what is happening within an organization's systems and processes, and what internal controls do they have in place. And our responsibility is to make sure that that is materially accurate, the things that are in the SOC report. If they say they have a control, we need to verify that that control is actually in place. That kind of looking at systems and processes more on a real-time basis is really where we're headed towards the audit of the future. And I think we're going to go through a number of iterations over the next 2, 5, 10 years. But I think we will start to see more and more that view of the world is going to become a larger percentage of what it is that we do and really what our clients need us to do as advisors.
I think it's super exciting. And so thank you so much for teasing the 10,000 foot view for these 4 transformative technologies. A couple of real quick things. So are the bots coming for our jobs? Do we need to be worried about these technologies saying, what are our first and second year team members going to be working on moving forward?
And that is an issue, because when you look at how many of us learned our profession we did these mundane, menial things, and that's how we learned. I mean, if you're, depending on how much experience you have, you may go back to the pre-computer era of when books were done by hand. So, you look at that and think about that progress and the evolution that's happening. It's not going to stop. And I think the tools, the technologies that we've talked about have incredible potential to dramatically change business, and then our role as CPAs in terms of how we interact with and the expectations from our clients in how we do that. So it really should be a positive conversation.
And that's what. How do we embrace that?
Yeah.
How do you embrace that?
So there will be challenges without a doubt, but in terms of when you think about we as humans, we as CPAs are moving up the value chain, where a lot of these things that we never really enjoyed doing anyway, we don't have to do anymore. We can have a digital assistant. We can have a bot that will do something for us so that we can do those things that are on our to-do list that we never get to. It's like, man, I would love to analyze this or look at the trends in that and figure out and understand. Well, if suddenly you had 3 hours every day that you weren't doing this non-value added activity where you could do that analysis, I think all of us would say, well, that's what I would prefer to do.
Sure.
So I think it has the opportunity to dramatically increase both whether it is accounting, whether it's tax, whether it's audit. I think there are implications for all of those technologies to make what we do and how we add value to the profession. It's going to create a lot of opportunities. So I think that negative view, will there be challenges? Will there be disruption? Absolutely, yes. But I think when you look at the ultimate benefit as what we as a profession, what we as a society can gain from it, far outweighs some of the negatives that we're going to hear about.
I think it's super exciting. And maybe one thing, what can the society, what can members and CPAs look forward to maybe this year as the year of kind of technology disruption awareness? What are you and your task force working on moving forward that we can look forward to?
So what we'd like to do, there's a couple things, actually there's several things that we're looking at doing, because the ultimate goal is to raise the level of awareness. One of the things that we did, the task force did at the beginning, was we assessed the MOCPA's members to find out what is their level of awareness and interest in these topics.
What'd you find?
The answer that we found was the level of awareness is very low, which didn't come as much as a surprise. What was surprising was that the level of interest in those technologies was also very low. So instead of it being, we know very little about it and we want to learn about it, the answer was, we don't really know much about it and we really don't want to learn about it. And so that's where we as a task force step back and realize, okay, well, for members to have that position, they don't understand the impact of these technologies. They don't understand that this isn't optional. These technologies are going to have an impact. And so what we're looking at doing, so this session was intended to be the starting point, the overview. This is why these technologies are important. What we hope to do from this point going forward is to actually have a session like this where we drill into these topics and we actually spend time going in so CPA can hear in language that's going to be beneficial to them about what these technologies are and the impacts that they have. So we're going to do that throughout the year. We're going to go through these 4 topics that we've talked about, but then there are other things that we need to get in front of, whether it's use cases, whether it is cybersecurity. There's different things that we need to get in front of people that maybe they haven't been educated in the past. So there's going to be a series of sessions like this. We're also going to look at, and this is really a great companion piece to the article that's in the January-February issue of The Asset, which has a great article in it that covers these 4 technologies. So after somebody has heard this, what I would highly recommend is to go get that issue of The Asset and read this, because it's a great companion piece to everything that we've talked about here. So ultimately, the task force goal is to raise that level of awareness and to get people to where we can capitalize on these opportunities instead of being negatively impacted because we're not prepared to deal with the changes that are going to happen. So that's what we're trying to do. We're also looking at, there's other ideas that we're looking at in terms of how can we add value to CPAs around Missouri. So whether that is an in-person conference around these technologies, whether is, we should create digital badges around these technologies so you can tell when somebody has been trained in a particular topic. There's a lot of different things that we're looking at, in addition to traditional written articles and those types of things. But we're trying to find different ways where we can interact with our members and help them get value from the interaction. So every time we have a touch point, CPAs feel like, okay, I better understand where we're going, and I better understand how those technologies could impact me and impact my clients. And that's really the goal of what we'd like to achieve.
I think that's fantastic. It's been a real pleasure working with you and the entire task force for the last six or so months to get us to this point. I'm really looking forward to some more great ideas and conversations. And I just want to say thank you so much for kicking off this podcast series. It's been a great interview.
Yeah,
thank
you
you
bet.
so much, David.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of MOCPA Bar Talk. If you have any questions or would like to chat a little bit more about the issues that we discussed, just let me know. My contact information is below.